Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burges Watson. Coming up on the programme today, an Air India plane bound for London carrying 242 passengers crashes shortly after takeoff from the western city of Ahmedabad in India. We'll get the very latest on this and ask, how could such a thing happen? We'll also have our regular weekly look at all things US and political. That's in a roundup with Amanda Makki. Lots to talk about, including protests in Los Angeles over US immigration policy. Plus, we'll have an exclusive interview with the former Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq and asking him what's behind the mounting tensions between Baghdad and the semi-autonomous region of Kurdistan. All of that coming up on Global News Today. Hello and welcome. Straight to our top story, the deadly plane crash in western India of a Boeing 7878 Dreamliner operated by the flag carrier Air India. Well, the plane crashed to the ground shortly after taking off from Ahmedabad Airport at 13:38 local time. Well, on board that flight, which was bound for London Gatwick Airport, 230 passengers, 2 pilots and 10 cabin crew. Well, the chairman of Air India has expressed his, quote, profound sorrow at this tragic accident. Well, the plane came down in a residential area close to the airport. Well, Terry Tozer is an aviation expert and a former airline pilot. He joins us now from the UK. Thank you very much indeed for being with us, Terry. I expect you've seen the same video footage as the rest of us. What are your first observations?
Well, I think probably as others have spotted, really, it's a very unusual situation where you've got an aircraft with the undercarriage down, descending, and apparently with no takeoff flap selected. You know, you wouldn't be 100% sure in saying that, but it does look like a clean wing, and normally there would be a degree of flap set for takeoff in order to generate the lift necessary to get a large aircraft off the ground.
I understand this is the first deadly crash involving a 7878 Dreamliner. Until now, I mean, that aircraft type appears not to have had any major issues. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. And I doubt whether it's a type-related incident in this case. I mean, one can never be sure this early on. But it is very extraordinary to see an aircraft that soon after takeoff with no flaps, because it simply won't meet the performance requirements in that configuration.
There have been some videos doing the rounds, and obviously we have to be cautious of what does the rounds on social media. It might not all be authentic, but someone who claims to have been a passenger on that very same aeroplane earlier in the day, flying, I believe, to or from Delhi, says that a lot of things weren't working. The call buttons weren't working. The in-flight entertainment system wasn't working. There were various other things that seemed to be malfunctioning. I mean, should we read anything into that, or would you say these are completely unrelated issues? Well,
those systems wouldn't affect the aircraft, the way the aircraft flies, but obviously you raise questions then about maintenance. Now, why the flaps were not in the correct position, I suppose, you know, it is possible that there was some technical reason for that when the crew had originally selected them correctly. It's very hard to know. It's all speculation at the moment. But normally, if the flaps were not set correctly for takeoff, there would be a warning to the crew. The aircraft would say it wasn't configured correctly. If the flaps were raised too soon after takeoff, that would be extremely unusual for a crew to make that kind of mistake. If there was a technical reason for the flaps retracting uncommanded, that would be very rare. But, you know, if you're looking at technical reasons or maintenance, I suppose the investigators will look at that. I mean, they'll look at absolutely every possible angle, I'm quite sure.
So we've talked about the aircraft type. What about the airline Air India? I mean, what sort of a safety record does that airline have?
Not wonderful. There was an awful Air India crash when one crashed into a residential area in Karachi, and that exposed quite a lot of issues. You know, I'm very reluctant to point the finger at airline or the crew this early on in the situation, because we simply don't know. None of those things may have been a factor. They wouldn't have been the top of my list to fly with. The Dreamliner, I would have no qualms about. It's had an excellent record. You know, we're all speculating and guessing at the moment. And no doubt the investigators will be very keen to get hold of the flight recorder and the voice recorder in order to see if that gives them the answers.
And on the issue of maintenance that you raised just a moment ago, I mean, the checks that are carried out on a passenger plane before it is, you know, put to use are pretty extensive, aren't they? I mean, are they uniform? Are they the same sort of checks that all airlines operating any given aircraft type would carry out in pretty much the same way, would you say?
In theory, the manufacturer will produce a schedule of maintenance and rectification and modification and anything that might need to be done by the engineering side of the airline. We know that human beings make mistakes. We know that not everybody operates exactly the same way. And as in any other role in life, there are some better than others. But I've not heard of anything maintenance or engineering wise that would give me any particular cause for concern. At the end of the day, I think the investigators will look at absolutely every possible angle to see what could have produced this, because the aircraft should have been able to take off perfectly normally, even with an engine failure.
I mean, we were saying just a moment ago how the aircraft type, the Dreamliner, has had a good safety record up until this point, but the same can't be said of Boeing as a whole, can it?
No, and I mean, obviously, the culture at Boeing was a great concern, because the culture that allowed the creation of the Boeing Max in the way that it did was appalling, and it was a different animal altogether. This is a brand new aircraft that was designed from scratch. The Boeing Max was a development, and a controversial development, of the old 737. So I don't really see that as a direct read across from one to the other. Obviously, we'll find out more in due course.
But nevertheless, I mean, what sort of an impact do you think this will have on the Boeing brand?
It won't be good. I suspect a lot of it will be irrational. I understand their shares have plummeted, which is pretty irrational. But you know, I think the investigators will look at hard fact and data and evidence, and what the markets and the reputations do will be the same as human reaction to any disaster, I imagine.
And just looking at, you know, the short period of time that plane was in the air for, you know, didn't really achieve much of an altitude. I mean, clearly the pilot will have had very little time to react. I mean, does it look like there's anything he could have or should have done that he didn't?
It's impossible to say at this point. I mean, if the flaps were retracted when they shouldn't have been for whatever reason, as you say, to first of all recognize that, and secondly react to it, and then thirdly to achieve a successful recovery by whatever means, not a lot of time involved. But, you know, I must stress that all public transport aircraft are designed to take off safely, even with an engine failure at the most critical point of takeoff. So this is very unusual, and at the moment, not really explicable.
Okay, so we're going to have to wait until the black box is recovered and its content released. I mean, what clues might that hold?
Well, it'll tell the investigators, assuming that the boxes are readable after that inferno. They should be, but it's not going to be a straightforward investigation. It will tell them whether the flaps were set beforehand, whether they retracted afterwards, and if so, why. So, that will be, or if in fact there was any other factor that we don't know about at this point.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Terry Tozer, aviation expert and former airline pilot. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
You're welcome.
Now, today is Thursday, and as ever, it is the day of the week when we take a look at some of the biggest stories of the week in the United States. Plenty to talk about, and for this, I'm joined, as last week, by Amanda Makki, who is a Republican strategist and lawyer who joins us from Tampa, Florida. Amanda, great to have you with us once again here on Arabiya English. Let's start by talking about the state of California, which is facing off with Washington in court today. This, of course, relates to President Trump's deployment of U.S. troops to the city of Los Angeles, where there have been several days of demonstrations. Those taking part, of course, protesting against President Trump's immigration crackdown. And we understand that some 700 U.S. Marines will be on the streets of L.A. By today or tomorrow. Amanda, I mean, there is this big debate, isn't there, in the U.S. about the use of military on U.S. soil. I mean, what's the thinking behind this deployment, do you think?
Well, President Trump has made no bones about being a law and order president, and he believes that a lot of this is political in nature, too, and that's why you see Josh Hawley, senator from Missouri, actually trying to investigate and sending letters to these organizations that are funding, not only funding the travel, but the per diems, some in the thousands of dollars a day that they're giving these protesters. I'm hearing as high as $6,000 to $12,000 a day that they're advertising on Craigslist. For protesters to go out and protest. And President Trump believes in law and order, and he's going to do everything that he can to not only make sure that he's taking illegals off the streets, which is something he campaigned on and promised to do, but also making sure that there is not civil unrest in these cities because their own leadership is unable to handle it.
And yet, there seems to be this debate in the US, and tell me how widespread this kind of discussion is, but people seem to be saying that the fact is these troops have done more to escalate tensions rather than alleviate tensions. I mean, is there any truth in that, do you think?
Well, I think that the power of the military is one that provides a shield in a way that makes people be maybe more likely to not go out and protest, because this is not that they're dealing with state law enforcement, they're dealing with feds, and that they know that the feds are serious and that they are going to enforce the laws and they're going to arrest people. For example, in the last hour, the FBI has just arrested the person who's been handing out face masks to people to shield their identities in these protests. So you have the impact of federal law enforcement as well as the military force that is making a big difference. And, Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, has only enforced this curfew for 2 nights from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. But really, I think that she's trying to do what she can, but really it's not enough. If the people of Los Angeles feel unsafe and afraid to come out of their homes because of what's happening, and they're fearing what these riots can do to destroy businesses and cause millions of dollars in loss, the president is stepping in to make sure that law and order is enforced.
And the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, of course, no particular friend of the president, is warning that democracy is under attack. Are you worried about overreach here?
I'm not. And this is the matter that is before the federal court today in San Francisco, as you mentioned. So basically, the governor of California is looking for a temporary restraining order, a TRO, from the federal law enforcement bodies. And that is something that will happen today in court. So we'll see what the outcome is. Of course, it can always be appealed. So this is not the end all be all, but they're taking the president to court. Basically, they're saying that, we need to have autonomy and sovereignty. State sovereignty is their issue. But really, these are sanctuary states, and the president is trying to make sure that he can do everything in his power to get rid of illegals, to get rid of people who are here illegally without documentation. And so he is well within his right, in my opinion, to do this. Of course, the states have a state sovereignty issue that they can raise, but I believe that it is paramount when it is an issue of law and order, especially as it comes to immigration enforcement.
Right, and this was very much part of the campaign, the set of campaign pledges from President Trump on the campaign trail. Just before we move on to our next topic.
And in fact, it's the highlight of President Trump's presidency for the last 150 days or so. I mean, this is where he gets the highest marks, is keeping Americans safe. And that's where independents, Republicans, and Democrats are aligned that he is doing a good job and give him high marks on that.
Okay, and I mean, just before we move on, is there evidence? I mean, what is the situation to suggest this unrest is spreading far beyond Los Angeles? What's the latest?
Well, there's 16 cities that it's taking place in. So they're in other cities throughout America, Seattle being one of them. And I think that what they're trying to do is to allow, of course, peaceful protests. No one is trying to stop that. But we're also trying to get to the bottom of who is funding this, who's supporting these protesters to go out there and risk their lives and certainly, harm the lives of law enforcement and others around them with the violence that they're inciting. So it is happening in New York City. It is happening in Seattle. It is happening in cities throughout the country. So they are mimicking what is happening in Los Angeles. But hopefully with President Trump's staunch, position on making sure that law enforcement gets involved, especially at the federal level, these will be peaceful protests, because that's certainly what we want. We want people to be able to express their First Amendment rights, but not in a way that demonstrates violence.
Okay, let's move on, because the unrest in California and elsewhere, as you've been saying, in the United States, has shifted some of the public attention away from what had become a very public spat between President Trump and Elon Musk. We were talking about this last week, you and I, Amanda. I mean, before the exchange on social media sort of took off, what was your reaction to this very public bust-up?
Well, it sounds like the Vice President, J.D. Vance, and the President's Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, got on a call with Elon Musk and kind of quelled the rhetoric, but basically told him to cut it out. And I think that Elon Musk got the hint and understood that this is not going to bode well for him, not financially, not with respect to the many companies that he owns. And really, it doesn't make him look good in any way. Elon Musk does have the ability to, especially on the younger male side of the Republican Party, he does very well, but he does not have a constituency like President Trump does. President Trump is the leader of this party. He is a force, and picking a fight with him is not a good idea. Now, they always say, as the adage goes, don't pick a fight with someone who buys ink by the barrel. One could argue that is Elon Musk, but then again, the person on the other end is the president of the United States, who has the biggest megaphone, maybe in the world. And so I think that Elon Musk quickly realized that the tantrum that he had, people just kind of started focusing on his drug use. And so it just didn't make him look good in any way, shape, or form. So he cut it out. And I think that's good. We don't need to have this civil, or I should say uncivilized way of handling our affairs. That's not good for anyone, and certainly it doesn't make him look good.
Right. I mean, as you say, and you're echoing actually some of the words of Mr. Musk Sr. When we spoke to him the following day, Elon Musk said, Donald Trump is going to come out of this on top, or words to that effect. He's got an 80% of Americans are happy with President Trump, or words to that effect. I also asked him, if this was a bump in the road or an end, or the end of the road to that relationship between the two men. Before I tell you what he said, what do you think?
don't think President Trump's jumping at the opportunity to make amends with Elon. I think that Elon's time was well served in Washington. He spent 130 days, the limit that is statutory limit for a special government employee to do what he could to bring to light, to disinfect parts of the government that needed light to be shined on. Parts of the government that are full of waste, fraud, and abuse, that are ineffective, that are duplicative. And so he did the best that he could do to bring all of that about in 130 days, which is really not a lot of time. So I think the president appreciates what he did. But, someone who betrays your confidence that way and betrays your trust that way, I think, you're always going to be hesitant to go back and spark another relationship with them. You certainly don't want to engage in a relationship with someone who goes off the deep end the way that he did, attacking him and saying, he should be impeached. There should be a new party formed. He wouldn't have won without me. The GOP only won because of me. That he was, implicated in the Epstein files. And so these are things that are very below the belt, in my opinion, and something that President Trump doesn't need in his life. So I don't know that there is going to be a reckoning of this relationship. Maybe on the surface there will be, but not the way that it was with Elon Musk shadowing the president for the last 10 months or so. Yeah,
Mr. Musk Sr. said he thinks this will all fizzle out. And we have heard Elon Musk saying he's sorry now. He thinks he went too far. And President Trump says that's very nice. So let's see what happens next. Now, thousands of miles away from Washington, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, made a few waves this week, saying that he doesn't think that an independent Palestinian state remains a goal of the U.S., and that a two-state solution probably won't happen, quote, in our lifetime. He's obviously a staunch pro-Israel conservative, the U.S. ambassador to Israel. The White House, the State Department didn't immediately respond to the comments he made. Do you think his views reflect the views of President Trump?
Well, I think President Trump really is at his heart a negotiator and really wants to negotiate a deal with Iran, negotiate a deal in this conflict in the Middle East that has been everlasting. President Clinton tried to do it with Yasser Arafat, and that didn't happen 2 decades ago. And so it's hard to believe that we'll be able to broker this. But I certainly think that everyone wants to, because the violence is very saddening. It's very unfortunate to see all the deaths, Hamas taking hostages, the deaths on both sides. It's very hard to watch and witness this. So I think President Trump at his heart wants to have this as one of his defining things of his presidency and of his legacy. He has now a grandchild that is half Arab. His daughter, Tiffany, is married to a man of Arab descent. And then you have, his daughter, who is a convert to Judaism. And so his other grandchildren, through Ivanka, are Jewish. And so I think for him, this is probably a sense of pride to be able to do something to make an outcome that is positive in that part of the world. The unfortunate reality is that this has escaped us for many, many decades, and it's hard to see that this would happen. With regards to Ambassador Mike Huckabee's statements, I think he's just pointing out that there's 644 times more land in the Arab world than there is in Israel, and if they want, they could create a country and carve out a country for Palestinians. And the comments are, I think, just looking at the numbers, he's saying, well, they have land, they could do it. But what I think he's really getting at is that, the violence and the behavior is so violent that no one is willing to take them on, not even people of their own religion and ethnicity. So I think that's really what he's getting at. But I think that's just the way that he put it. So we'll see what the State Department has to say about that.
Okay, just lastly, U.S. producer prices increased slightly in May, though by a smaller amount than forecast. Consumer prices also increased marginally in the month of May. The labour market looks like it might be softening a little bit. Economic activity might be slowing a little bit. What's your sense of the overall health of the U.S. economy?
Well, as someone who lives in the United States, and I go between Washington, D.C. and Florida, I really have seen that gas prices have dropped, which is interesting given the summer months. Usually gas prices are on the rise. So I think that is actually one of the metrics that helped bring down the inflation to just be 0.1%. So you have that rents are going up, but food prices are coming down. So eggs, poultry, meat, fish, kind of your basic basket of goods, those prices are coming down while rents and maybe other things are going up, but not those basket of goods that you normally are in the routine of buying. So I think rent helped propel that to the small amount that it did go up. But otherwise, the items that you're purchasing on a daily basis or maybe on a weekly basis, gas, for example, those have stayed down or have gone down or stayed at the same price.
Any sense that perhaps tariffs have boomeranged back and affected price levels and impacted consumers at all?
I don't think so. And President Trump keeps negotiating deals. I mean, obviously, we heard about China just yesterday. And so I think that, there's so much that's been up in the air that nothing has been formalized or made firm. So I think that right now things are fine. But, of course, Walmart has said that prices will go up. And President Trump, of course, his response was they should eat that. And so it really remains to be seen. But I don't see this, and I don't feel this either. People aren't worrying. People aren't concerned. People are still purchasing homes. People, even though interest rates, the interest rates are staying the same, by and large, a little bit higher than what they've been for the last maybe 10 years or so in the United States. But people are buying homes and people are making large purchases still. So I haven't really seen a huge dramatic shift. But of course, we could talk in a month and all of that would change.
All right, well, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Amanda Makki, Republican strategist and lawyer. Thanks as ever for joining us here on Arabiya.
Thank you.
Now we're going to turn our eye to what appear to be mounting tensions between Iraq's central government in Baghdad and Erbil, the capital of the semi-autonomous Kurdistan region. Well, these tensions stem from disagreements over the sharing of oil revenues, with Baghdad accusing Erbil of striking what it views as illegal oil deals with foreign governments. Well, that's prompted the central government to block funding for Kurdish public sector salaries, and now the Kurdish authorities are threatening to retaliate. Well, in that context, people have been taking to the streets in parts of the Kurdistan region this week in protest. Meanwhile, Washington has weighed in, urging both sides to resolve their differences and engage in dialogue. Well, for more, we can speak now to the Iraqi Kurdish politician Hoshyar Zebari, who served as Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq and also as Minister of Finance and Minister of Foreign Affairs. That's a position he held for 11 years. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Mr. Zebari, here on Al Arabiya English. Really appreciate it. Let's talk immediately about those fresh tensions between Baghdad and Erbil, which is, of course, the capital and the most populated city of Kurdistan in Iraq. How would you describe the state of relations right now between Baghdad and Erbil?
Well, the state of relations is not good, in fact, and relations have really deteriorated recently, especially after the federal government of Baghdad have suspended payment for the public servants in Kurdistan. Kurdistan region is a federal entity, but it's part of a wider country called Iraq. And there should have been equal treatment of all the public servants in the country. We feel that this decision is discriminating against our innocent people, and it's unfair, and it's politicized, actually. It's not constitutional. In fact, the region has a share in the annual budget of Iraq. Now it's estimated to be about 12% of the overall budget. But Iraq is dragging its feet. It's not making its obligations, you see, to pay this installment on time. And recently they have taken a decision, in fact, with some alibis which are not correct about the oil deals with American companies recently signed in Washington. In fact, the region is governed by a constitution that we, the Iraqi people, voted in 2005. That is the social contract we have in this unified country. And in fact, it has given the region some right, you see, to do oil extractions, to do contracts with foreign companies, of course, with cooperation with Baghdad. But really the main point of contention, Iraq by constitution is a federal entity, while the Iraqi government, the current government, deals with the region as a centralized region, not have any status like Scotland, like Wales, like many other federal or autonomous regions in the world. It has been treating us very badly, so the relations really is not going well so far. Although there are efforts and talks to resolve this issue, these financial issues, still the Iraqi government is in debt for payment for the region, but it is still unresolved.
Okay, well, of course, you wear two hats because you worked in central government for many years. You are, of course, Kurdish and you're in Erbil now. So, I mean, I'm wondering whether you have a role to play here somehow as a bridge figure to try to mend these differences and to resolve the situation. I mean, what role are you playing?
Well, we try to give our good advice to both sides, to be honest with you. I'm in touch with Iraqi officials in Baghdad and also here with the Kurdish regional governments. In fact, here Iraq is at a fault. I mean, let's be very clear, although I'm speaking as a Kurdish, but as an Iraqi also. I have served in government for many, many years, and I know the inner working of the government and the previous agreements, the previous budget laws that we try to legislate. So we know what is going on. I mean, these decisions are really politicized. Their sole aim is to undermine this autonomous region that has been rising up, has been flourishing, have seen more progress than the rest of the country because of open policies, of free investments, for free trade. And really, this is the root cause of the problem. It's one of, it's not a technical issues about budgetary issues or figures or providing transparent information. They have everything. But still, it is a political decision to punish the Kurdish people at large. I mean, even if there are political differences, yes, it could be resolved through dialogue, but to punish the public servants, which we have over 1 million, these people are relying on their payrolls in the government, and all of a sudden it has been suspended, not for this month, not for the rest of the year, which will create a backlash, to be honest with you, that people here in the region feel that Baghdad government is not treating us on equal footing with the rest of the Iraqi public servants.
Okay, so, I mean, from a Baghdad point of view, and do correct me if I've misunderstood the situation, but it seems as though, and what we're being told in the reports, is that Erbil has been striking these independent oil deals, notably with the United States, and that's a challenge to Iraqi sovereignty. Help me understand, where's the money from those deals being remitted? Is it being received in Erbil or is it being received by the central government?
Well, let's set the records correct. Before, actually, the Kurdistan region was relying for its budget on Baghdad payment. It has a share in the annual budget. I mean, it changed from 17% to now it's about 12%, so there wasn't much problem. Only when Baghdad tried to suspend this payment, the Kurdish region started to export oil, okay? I mean, through Turkey to the international market. And then recently, 2 years ago, there was a ruling by the Paris Arbitration Commercial Court to suspend this oil shipment through Turkey for some legal claims. And the KRG, of course, suspended these oil shipments through the Iraqi-Turkish pipeline. It was a contention between Iraq and Turkey, but we were caught in the middle. But the Kurdish region accepted that all oil export, the revenue should go to the national budget and then be redistributed. So these oil deals actually are in lines with the Iraqi laws, with the constitution, and these companies who have signed these contracts have entered into law court suits in Baghdad, and they won their cases, you see, in front of Iraqi court. So nothing is hidden, nothing is untransparent, but Iraq is making this an issue for ulterior motives, to be honest with you, that these companies will produce gas and electricity, which will be for the benefit of the whole region. And I believe this would to replace the Iranian gas supplies to Iraq and electricity, so on. So it's a bit muddled, the issue. In fact, it has other ulterior motives.
So
but the contracts are open and transparent, and
just to be clear, I mean, so we're not talking about a situation in which the Kurdish federal authorities, the Kurdish regional authorities are not taking the revenue from oil deals and not sharing it with the rest of the country. It is going to Baghdad, and Baghdad is now not delivering on the budgetary money required for salaries and these sorts of things. Is that understanding correct?
Not really. That is correct, actually. That is correct. And we have agreed to hand over all the oil exports to Baghdad to go to the central coffer of Iraq and then be redistributed according to the budget law, which we have a share in that. This is not being observed, unfortunately.
There is this accusation that the Prime Minister of Iraq, Mohammed Shia al-Sudani, is intentionally trying to weaken Kurdish autonomy. Why would he do that?
Well, because their mentality is not a federalist one. Democracy needs Democrats, and federalism needs federalists, really. He is still thinking along the line of centralism, of authoritarianism, unfortunately, and it seems that they have not learned from the lessons of the past. We've seen Saddam Hussein's rule and how it ended, many others, but we have a constitution, really, that everybody has to abide by or to live by. And unfortunately, we believe there are clear violations of this social contract that we wanted to build the new Iraq. And over 80% of the Iraqi people voted for this constitution.
Okay, Mr. Zebari, you're quoted as saying that this will not pass quietly. You're implying there's going to be retaliation for this decision by Baghdad not to supply the money to pay the salaries for people in the public sector in the Kurdish semi-autonomous region. What are you talking about with regards to retaliation? What form might that retaliation take, sir?
Well, it would be political retaliation, definitely. I mean, this injustice will not pass. In fact, we are going to have a national election in Iraq this year, hopefully, if there are not other regional, international adventures or conflict or escalations. I'm hoping that, crossing our fingers, everything will move smoothly. We have in November a general election in Iraq, and we will participate in this election. We have our electoral weight, definitely, as the Kurds, not one party or the other generally, we have a say in the new government of Iraq, or through the political alliances that each and every prime minister who have governed Iraq has needed these political alliances to form his new cabinet or new government. There we will have a say, definitely, who has been fair to us, who has been unfair to us. This is what I meant.
Are we looking at the possibility of unrest? Are we looking at the possibility of heightened tensions between Erbil and Baghdad?
Well, actually, the tension is there, and also the recent escalation between the United States, Israel, and Iran is also reflecting on the situation here in Iraq. And from yesterday, we've seen many warning shots of asking the non-essential staffs to leave Iraq, or there is new travel advisory for people. And we see the threats and the counter threats. All these are reflecting really on the overall situation, not only in Iraq, but maybe in the wider region in the Middle East. But everybody is waiting until Sunday to see the sixth round of talks between the United States and Iran over the nuclear program. But already tension is rising. I mean, between, unfortunately, Baghdad and the KRG and the region as a whole, and we are part of this region, so we'll be affected one way or another.
Sure, and we'll come back to Iran in a moment, because you point out to the fact that there are other factors involved. But just keeping our focus on Iraq specifically at the moment, and I'd like to get your opinion on the health of democracy in Iraq today, because there are concerns in Washington about corruption. That's not a new concern. There's also concern about foreign influence in Iraq's affairs. Do you think those two concerns are justified?
Both concerns are justified. In fact, there is the widest spread of corruption is now taking place in the country. And I would say not millions, but billions are being misspent or misappropriated, are being used to fund electoral campaigns for this official, that minister, or that head of the list. And I think the Treasury Department knows all this. Also, there is a lot of corruptions about US dollars being smuggled to outsiders and not being used properly, or not identifying the end user. I think all this is, except some large oil companies, and also about foreign influence. Yes, it is there. I mean, it's not a hidden fact. Iraq, we've always thought that Iraq should stand on its feet, should be independent, should seek friendship with all its neighbors, with the international community, but it has to be its own masters, you see, of taking its national interest being first before serving others. So these concerns are real, not only in Washington, but in many Western capitals, in the Gulf region also.
And Mr. Zebari, just to interrupt you there, just for the sake of clarity,
take our government or the statement very seriously.
Yeah, I just want to, I mean, when we talk about foreign interference, let's be clear, we're talking about Iran, aren't we?
Well, Iran has a great influence. It's not a hidden fact, actually. It's there, you see.
Growing influence?
Of course, I mean, there are other influences also in the country, but... Sorry?
Is that influence growing? I mean, when you look at how Iran has essentially lost two spheres of influence, and I'm talking about Lebanon and Syria.
No, I think it has... it has really retreated, not as strong as before, but obviously it's still there. I mean, we all have seen what happened since 7th of October in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Damascus. and their influence have been reversed. But in Iraq, I think it's there. Sometimes if it's legitimate, it's legitimized, you see, as two neighbors who have shared many cultural, religious, historical facts. But really, the Iraqi government has to act independently of any foreign interference. And that has been the message when I was serving in the government, have to relay all the time to all our neighbors, to Tehran, to Ankara, to Riyadh, to everybody.
So there are reports, of course, that Washington is considering sanctions targeting certain Iraqi individuals. And I'm wondering where that leaves the Kurdish authorities. Where does that leave Erbil, and how does it affect Erbil's relationship with Baghdad?
Well, as you know, historically, we have very close, good relations with the United States. We have been allies with Western Europe, with many Arab countries, and still we enjoy this contacts, actually. We develop them, we nourish them, so we are not shy of showing it also. And they have an influence, they have a say also in settling these differences between Erbil and Baghdad, especially Washington, I think, who is acceptable arbiter between Erbil and Baghdad, and they are using their influence trying to address this issue without leading to any destabilization in Iraq as a whole.
And do these Iran-backed militia groups that we hear about in Iraq, do they pose any particular threat to the Kurdish region?
Well, in the past, yes, they have rocketed us, they have sent drones, they attacked our economic installations, our airports, but that has been suspended for a few years. So there was almost a truce, let's put it that way. Or we were bombarded by ballistic missiles from Iran across the border a couple of times. But this has been a suspension of these hostilities. But the militias are there. They are legalized now. They get their money from the government, you see. And $3 billion a year, let's say, according to the budget figures, they are receiving as an alternative security army, okay, in Iraq, and all the calls to integrate them, to try to unify the security forces have not been successful.
Just with regards to the overall security situation in Iraq and in Kurdistan, obviously we're hearing reports that the US is partially evacuating its diplomatic mission in Baghdad. I mean, what does that tell us about the overall state of security in the country and where things could be headed?
Well, this decision, it means the threat of escalation is real and serious, as precautionary. And before any conflict, I think this evacuation, these alerts are being issued. But it shows that this time, no, I think the situation is far more serious than many analysts or people think, because it seems we are going to see the conditions of a perfect storm in the region.
Do you think Iraq essentially has to make a choice between where its allegiances lie, either Washington or Tehran? I mean, it can't have both, can it?
Of course, that has been the problem, actually, of many Iraqi governments, especially this government, was trying to appease everybody, but when you appease everybody, you lose everybody. That's a role. So still it's not finding where it should position itself.
And where does that leave the Kurdish leadership? Which alliance would you like the Kurdish politicians to focus their efforts on?
Well, the Kurdish leadership have been very public, open. You see, we are an ally to the American, to Europeans, to many Gulf states, you see, and the diplomatic exchange, the visits have been a message, really. I mean, we adhere to our partnership. We are also part of Iraq. We want to resolve all our outstanding problems with Sudanese government, with Baghdad. But really, they have been mistreating us very, very badly. I mean, honestly, I could say that from a position of responsibility, from my experience, we've never been treated so bad as now by this government.
Okay, clearly a resolution is required. Washington wants dialogue between yourselves and the authorities in Baghdad.
Yes.
We talked at the beginning about how you could play a bridging role because you know both worlds very well. I mean, how do you see efforts to resolve this panning out? Because, I mean, just as an extension of that question, I mean, if you're mentioning that Iraq as a whole faces some grave national security issues, this needs to be fixed.
Yes. No, it's very easy, very simple, actually. I think there are accounts, there are accountability also. I mean, we admit that. And I'm not going to absolve the Kurdistan regional government for all its mistakes. No, I think there are some shared responsibilities. But I think the resumptions of a normal, healthy relation is for Baghdad to resume these payments according to the rest of the country. It cannot discriminate against its own people. I mean, the Kurds now in Iraq, about 7 million of the total population of Iraq. And this is a public punishment for all the people, and it's creating a backlash that really why Baghdad is doing this to us.
So what is your message to the Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani? If you could tell him in 30 seconds what your solution to this is, what's your message? And let's see if he hears it.
Well, you should act as the Prime Minister of the whole country, not of a sect, not of a part of the country. I mean, these people, you should look upon them also as your citizens. And the way you do pay the public servants in Basra and so on, you should pay the public servants in Erbil or Sulaymaniyah without any discrimination. It's simple truth. I mean, a clear cut, the simple truth of the matter. And he has the money, he has the authority. So now we are going through the legal process, you see, to take a court decision against the ruling of the Prime Minister Sudani. So we are following all the rules, actually, but I think the key is in Baghdad. They should resume this payment.
Okay, Washington, as I said, wants dialogue. Is that dialogue happening? And are you confident that a solution will be found?
Well, yes, we are. We are for dialogue. I think so. I'm hopeful. I think a solution could be found, and Washington rule has been very instrumental, very important for both sides, and I'm hopeful that this issue would be settled, you see. Yes.
All right. Well, on that positive note, we have to wrap up this conversation, but we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you.
Hoshyar Zebari,
thank you
for your time.
Most welcome, Tom. Most welcome.
Well, that is all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for a look back at some of the highlights of the week's interviews. Until then, bye-bye.